Is this World Cup going to change women's cricket in India forever?
With the World Cup starting in a day's time, a lot has changed since the last Women's World Cup. Not only in terms of the way the girls are playing on the field, but also the way people are watching the game, especially in this country. Now, before we talk about what's changed, the World Cup itself, and as BCCI had done enough to promote women's cricket and the World Cup, hit that subscribe button. And here's also a promo from our membership, which is also related to the first from women's cricket and how women have impacted the game of cricket itself.
But nobody knew about a Rachel Hayhoe Flint, for example. So
people always talk about how the first World Cup's always been the 75 World Cup and the next World Cup 79 and whatever. But no one talks about how 2 years before was actually the first ever World Cup, and it happened to be the Women's World Cup in 73.
But yeah, this was the first few documented games of cricket. Married women versus single women. Just take a moment for that to sink in.
Reason we bowl overarm or round arm or whatever, we don't bowl underarm or chuck the ball or any of that, was because of just one woman. It's not even a team of women, or it's not even a game or a match. It was a cricketer's sister that started this. And then we see the women's game disappearing for more than 60 years.
And what he had to say, this is his assessment, that cricket was, quotes, not a game for women. Over the last 8 years, the women's cricket game has grown dramatically. This is evident not only in the kind of performances and the leagues that have sprung up all over the world, but also in how much the game has improved in terms of the run scoring as well as the wicket taking. This is evident right from 2016, 1 year prior to the 2017 World Cup, and from there we'll pick it up all the way to present day and see how things have evolved over this period. If you have a look at this data, one of the biggest changes that is evident is how much more batting improvement has been seen over these years. The run rate from 2016-17 of 4.2 has gone up to 4.5 in the next World Cup duration, and from there to present day it's gone up to 5.1 across the world. Batting averages have also continued to increase, but also along with that, the frequency of century scoring is something that has also gone up significantly. From seeing a century every 4.1 matches when it was in 2016-17, that has gone up doubled to 1.9 matches as we approach this World Cup. This improvement in batting is also evident in the strike rates itself, as where the strike rate in 2016-17 was just around 65 on average, that number has gone up to almost 80 in the present day. This has also impacted the bowling in the sense that the bowling averages have slowly started to increase through the years, but if you'll see, more wickets have started to fall. And this is falling in general trends with how cricket is evolving as a sport, and a lot has to do with how the T20 leagues have come up all over the world and just increased the overall quality of cricket, at least amongst the stronger nations. Even the kind of fitness levels and the power that we are seeing from the girls today is something that is unparalleled as compared to the past. For instance, we've already seen 203 sixes that have been hit in 2025 alone, whereas if you compare that to 2017, in the entire year you only had 208 sixes hit.
And it comes with no surprise that the quality of batting and bowling and the ability to set higher targets and chase them has come up with the rise of a lot of T20 leagues around the world, the WPL, the WBBL, the WCPL, and even the 100 for that matter. The rise of T20 leagues around the world have compelled the girls to be more fitter, stronger, and be able to play a lot more cricket around the world than they used to do before. That's also why if you take the example of the Indian cricket team, they have scored more 300 plus scores this year alone than they have previously ever in the history of the ODI format. Like a lot of people talk about the advantages of IPL, having uncapped player rub shoulders with international stars is the same for the women players when they play franchise cricket. Having Indian uncapped players rubbing shoulders with the Australian greats only allows them to grow much more, but also helps them get exposure to different cultures all around the world. It's not surprising that Australia over the years since the start of women's cricket have been able to dominate the game. It's also not surprising that the Australian side have been able to keep up with the pace of the game, because for starters they are the ones setting the pace and the trend for the game itself. Because if you look at the Australian Women's Franchise Tournament, which is the WBBL, that was the first ever women's franchise league to start all around the world, which happened in 2015. And now if you look at this chart, you'll realize that almost 200 girls from Australia play the WBBL alone, and the rest travel around the world to play the WPL and even the 100. And this is also where things get a little more intricate, in the sense that if you see sides like England and India who also have their own franchise franchise leagues, they also send their players all around the world to play other franchise tournaments. And it's no surprise that countries like Australia, England, and India can afford to do it because of the amount of revenue the cricketing boards have. And it is no coincidence that heading into this World Cup, these three are the sides that are contenders to win the World Cup in the first place. Because you see players from these three countries rub shoulders with the legends of the game, players who have played for a longer period of time and been able to be successful. And this exposure only helps you as a player grow much faster than you already would. Unlike a player if you're from Sri Lanka, when you're not getting a lot of opportunities to play around the world, especially in the franchise tournaments. And another advantage of having franchise tournaments all around the world is you don't have to play for your country to gain experience, because you can travel to England, Australia, and the West Indies with the WCPL to gain that exposure while playing franchise tournaments.
And this is where we narrow our focus down to the BCCI, to the WPL, and all of the things that the BCCI has been able to do correctly to be able to push women's cricket forward leading up to this point for the World Cup. For starters, it is worth calling out the fact that the WPL was as recent as 2023. Compare that to something like the WBBL that started off all the way back in 2015, and you might feel that BCCI was definitely late to the bandwagon. And obviously, it is a good thing that the WPL was started, but even beyond that, as soon as it began, there were already signs that this was a step in the right direction. The league in its very first year was able to sell franchise rights for 4,600 crore and media rights for 950 crore. It also helped that popular franchisees like a Mumbai Indians or a Royal Challengers Bangalore, and even Delhi Capitals for that matter, brought into these WPL teams. What this meant was that there was already an established brand moving forward, and so there would be some kind of fan interaction and movement into the WPL. And here, if you're being honest, there was definitely a gap between the skill levels of players from various franchises. It is no surprise that someone like Mumbai Indians or a better established team like RCB was able to win the WPLs in the initial seasons. However, this has been a boon unintentionally. What this has done, especially for a team like a Gujarat Giants that has consistently finished at the bottom of the table, is that it has forced them to look outwards and into the Indian domestic structure, create a lot of scouting opportunities for people, and look at exploring talent in India. The added impact of having established franchises is that they already have a system in place, and so they are almost able to just extend this from men's cricket into women's cricket. The biggest examples are someone like Mumbai Indians, who's done a brilliant job at scouting, not only in men's cricket but also in the WPL, and we've seen that over the years. They've been able to pick up some really skilled players over the years and have highlighted how these players can become important, especially once they come into the WPL and have that kind of exposure. A crucial insight, however, into the WPL, especially the first couple of seasons, was that the teams that were winning the least number of league games were the teams where uncapped Indian players were getting more number of opportunities. Now, it is sad that this is the scenario, and we can also see it in examples from this table where someone like UP Warriors, who's done horribly throughout the seasons of the WPL, actually had more of their uncapped players getting opportunities. Gujarat Giants once again has not been one of the better teams in the WPL, and this is once again reflected in this very table. As much as this might be unfortunate at a franchisee level and in the WPL for the respective team, it has proved to be quite the blessing for India. What you'll see, especially from the recent WPL, is that someone like Kranti Gaud or Uma Chetri, who are currently a part of the World Cup squads, shot into limelight because of their performances in the WPL. Kranti Gaud is one of the best examples, especially when India was struggling to find a proper pace battery. She's come in and grabbed the spot by the neck. But just outside being able to scout talent, what the WPL has also done is that this has trickled down into state levels. For the longest time, we did not have a lot of leagues, not only by the BCCI but also just in general for women's cricket. This is something that is rapidly changing because we're now seeing tournaments like the Maharani Trophy or T20 tournaments being conducted in states like Bengal or Odisha and even Tamil Nadu for that matter. And this helps the women not only from the perspective of just getting enough game time and recognition in leagues other than just the WPL, but for instance, even if the BCCI is not going to be holding a lot of domestic tournaments, there is still a source of income, and this makes it a lot more realistic for these girls to take up cricket. For example, there are scenarios where even international players in the Indian setup might not get chances for the WPL side, and this could simply be due to combinations of the fact that they're not fit enough to make it to the 11. However, in a case like this, they're still able to go and play something like a Goa Premier League or able to play something like the Maharani Trophy, where they can showcase their skills, also earn a decently sized paycheck, and come back stronger not only for a tournament like WPL but also increase their chances for an India call-up. And the last but an underrated point here, and something we might not give much importance to, is the simple fact that the BCCI allows the women cricketers from India to go and play in T20 leagues around the world. This means that these players get exposure not only to rub shoulders with some of the most experienced and well-known players all around the world, but they also get exposure to those very conditions and different styles of playing, ensuring that they're able to carry forward with the trends.
All that being said, this is where we come down to what BCCI has done for the Indian cricket team, but also especially for the upcoming World Cup in terms of promotion, marketing, and making sure that this World Cup being played in India can bring about a change not just at a global level, but also amongst the families and girls within the country itself. For starters, if you look at how many matches the Indian team has played 1 year leading up to the World Cup, you will realize that this year we have played the most amount of matches. Leading up to 2017, we had played 14 matches. Leading up to 2022, we had played 16. And leading up to 2025, we had played 23 matches. In fact, the same month that the World Cup is starting, we had played a series against Australia and 2 more warm-up matches. We have also made an entire video on matchups and the players and the opponents India should watch out for. So if you haven't checked that out, go check that out. And this is why we look at what BCCI has done to the World Cup and how horrendous they've made the fan experience to be, especially fans traveling from all around the world coming to India. Alright, to give you a little perspective, a World Cup that is starting at the end of September, you would normally like to believe that the tickets were out and the schedules were fixed 6-7 months ago, and that's exactly what's happened with the T20 World Cup of 2026, where the tickets are already out for the Women's T20 World Cup. But the way the BCCI have handled the tickets and the scheduling, the venues weren't even fixed until the end of August, and it's only after that they had started selling the tickets in the first place. A lot of people started celebrating the fact that once the ticket sales were out, the minimum price of the ticket were 100 rupees. But if you think about it, the only reason that they did that is because of how late they started selling the tickets, and they wanted people to buy the tickets as soon as possible. This is a simple case of increasing the demand by decreasing the cost. As much as India loves cricket themselves, it was very, very important for the fan experience all around the world to be increased. This was the best opportunity after messing up the 2023 World Cup schedule to get more fans from all around the world, from Australia, England, South Africa, and even Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, to get those fans within the country, because it just helps increase the cricketing culture. But you can't have fans flying across halfway around the world, only know the schedules and fixtures a month before the World Cup starts. And this is very nitpicky. This happened in the 2023 World Cup as well, and this is almost inevitable, but it's the fact that a 50-over World Cup is taking place in a time of the year when it's raining all around the country. And I say it's inevitable because the summer is obviously taken by the IPL, and you would need another window for the World Cup. But as a country with a lot of money and power in this sport, you would hope that the BCCI does a lot more for women's cricket and hosting World Cups. The one positive is that the prize money of the winning team in this year's World Cup is the highest it's ever been. In fact, it's higher than the Australian team's winning prize in the 2023 Men's World Cup.
One added criticism is the simple fact that BCCI has just not chosen any popular cricketing venues that could be iconic for the Women's World Cup. Hosting matches in an Eden Gardens or a Wankhede would have been quite the spectacle, especially for an event as big as the World Cup. However, it is unfortunate that we will not be having that as the case, but the flip side is that smaller stadiums and smaller places will get a lot more cricket. For example, places like a Guwahati or a Visakhapatnam that don't get a lot of cricket, and in fact in the recent past have been deprived of a fair amount of international cricket, finally get to experience that. This is big not only because the stadiums will then get an opportunity to host these people, but they will also get an opportunity to get a lot of crowds coming in, which means exposure for young kids who might be looking to get into cricket. This is great from the cultural standpoint that it at least promotes cricket in smaller cities that otherwise might not be looking to push the cricketers forward. And it is also good for the state boards themselves because they will be paid by the BCCI for this event. This money they get from the BCCI is used by the state boards to hopefully better their infrastructure and capabilities to be able to host matches for the World Cup. In addition, businesses around the stadium as well as the city itself might thrive a lot more simply because of the fact that a lot more crowd might be flying in for these matches. With the warm-up matches and India recently playing a series against Australia, we can only hope that this is enough motivation as well as build up to an event like the World Cup. Of course, there are a lot of preparations that could have been panned out in a much better manner, but that's not to say that the BCCI has not put in any kind of effort to make this a substantial event. All in all, it will be the quality of cricket in the Women's World Cup and especially how India's campaign goes that determines the popularity of the tournament moving forward, especially to the business end. This has been a video on the World Cup, BCCI's efforts to try and make it a big event and how things might pan out. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments down below on what your thoughts are on any of these topics and if you would expect more from the BCCI and things that they could do. Like this video, share it with your friends, but most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We are going to be covering every India game through the World Cup. We are going to be going live both pre and post every game. That's it from us and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.